When it gets a whip it goes crazy and could hurt someone. Think about this huge fire hose, okay? It was just Chris Doumit who gave the mine everything. After that he quit moving. Chris had given everything he had, but the gold was still coming in. He worked even though it hurt, it was stressful, and it was late at night. But this time was different. He left the gold room without saying a word, leaving tools stacked in buckets and lined up. Let's go back to the moment he dropped everything and shocked everyone. There is blood in the gold room. The season started the same way every other year. Big plans and talk. Parker asked for 10,000 ounces. That number was like fog in the air. Very thick, very heavy, and hard to avoid. On film it sounded brave, but everyone there knew what it meant. And there were more broken things to fix and longer days. There was a lot of noise and running going on around Big Red Rock Sand and Bob's plant. In the middle of all that chaos, Chris was the only thing that stood between danger and delivery. But something was coming and nobody could stop it. I don't think that coffee and smokes will help right now. And everything will get backed up if I make a bottleneck. It's going to lead to terrible problems. The small boxes gurgled with slurry and were full of hope. There was 3 times as much stress when 3 plants were running. Each load added a different kind of stress. The screens moved. The pumps were almost stopped. The lines broke when they were pushed. Chris kept everything together, even though he was tired and had a wrench in one hand. He wasn't just the guy in the gold room. He was the one who could keep the mine's soul from stopping moving. But every man has a limit to how strong he is, and Chris knew him better than anyone else. He sanitized everything and looked over every part. He cared for every grain like it was the last one that went through his hands. A lot of accuracy like that hurts you over time. This is the kind of work that doesn't shout. It talks softly. It grows. It's too late by the time it roars. Around the middle of the season, the whisper turned into a scream for Chris. There were so few people on the team that the ground almost cracked under them. Parker was very focused on his 10,000-ounce dream and wasn't calling for help from anyone else. Not one person. Chris was left alone in the gold room to watch the buckets fill up like thunderclouds. He never once said anything bad. He was fine, but that didn't mean it. He stood up in a different way. He walked more slowly. He could not bounce back his shoulders like he used to. He still had fire in his eyes, but it was less bright. Then there was the moment when everything changed. It was almost like a whisper that he dropped the idea of bringing someone new in. Not to take his place, but to help and keep the walls from closing in. Tatiana Costa was a top operator and one of the best drivers. But she was now being considered for a job that required her to do something completely different. The gold room wasn't just a new task. It was a test of trust and power. We'll just take Tatiana then. Tatiana? Yes. Wonderful. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that, friend. Thanks a lot. I can finally take a deep breath. It wasn't easy to decide. Mitch and Tyson didn't like it. Even though the machines needed her, Chris needed help more than they did. Parker said yes. Not really, reluctantly. It was something though. A man who hadn't breathed in months had just enough space to stand up. Tatiana began her training. Chris watched, told and led. He didn't bark. He didn't say anything bad. That's how he taught. He cared about getting things done right, not just quickly. Even though she was smart and strong, the change was still scary for a man who was used to doing everything by himself. The question, was this enough or was it too late, kept running through her mind as she moved. 70 ounces, then 289, then even more. The gold totals were fun to watch on TV. Parker was happy about them. There was a toll counter in the gold room though, and it was going up. Every cleaning that mattered had his mark on it. Chris was behind every number that broke a record. Not in the spotlight, but where things got done, in the dark. Other than that, this season was different. Not only were the numbers bigger, they were also very harsh. It was a different strain. Not only did it test the body, but it also broke the heart. No one likes to be asked that question. Is it worth it? Chris didn't say anything. He replied by being quiet. The way he paused before beginning a new shift. That stop meant something because of how he looked at the buckets and didn't rush to pick them up. It had been a bad season before, with bad weather, broken tools, and even worse choices. It's not how much fuel or filters cost, but how much people cost. 74.495. We do everything. What a jerk. I guess all I can say is thanks for the gold price. The gold room was more than just a place to wait. It was a trick. Men who stayed in that box for too long were turned into numbers. Chris could feel the heat. There was more weight on each step, scoop and cleanup than there was before. There were no breaks or days off. There was only the steady hum of gears and the scream of schedules. There was no more going back after that. There wasn't a bad mood. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't busy. Chris didn't yell. He didn't hit anything. He just started to wonder out loud in short, careful words if he was done. And that was scary because when a man like Chris starts to question, the whole crew starts to worry. He kept things in balance and brought calm to a world that was moving too fast. Parker may have been in charge, but Chris held everything together. The ship as a whole can feel when the anchor starts to move. The team did their best to keep up. Even though they tried to change, they couldn't get rid of the thought that something important was falling apart. She did her best, Tatiana. She took care of the goal. That's right. She did a lot of work. She wasn't Chris though. There wasn't anyone. It changed how the room felt. The machinery kept going. The number of ounces kept going up. Something else was going on though, despite all the progress. Quiet dedication, the promise that Chris would always be there, was breaking down. It was what kept the team together. Chris wasn't being lazy. He was just tired. Very tired. This kind of tired can't be fixed by a nap. The kind that gets deep inside. The kind that makes a man think about other roads, his home, and his breath. The 10,000 ounces was big. If there was a finish line, it was hard to see. Chris was still after it, but he stopped. He was attempting to stand up straight. That became the new goal. Get through the day. That's when giving everything finally made someone want something back. There was nothing more to give. It's not always loud to leave. It can start when things don't feel normal anymore. The person in the middle of a monster machine. Chris Doumit was the man in the middle, in the mind, where screaming steel and muddy desire were all around him. Not the boss or the newbie at the bottom, but the person who was in charge of both. He wasn't yelling directions or messing around with the controls. Making sure the chaos kept going was something he always did. Not perfectly or without effort, but it's working. That was enough to keep the dream alive. He wasn't made to give up. Because he had worked hard all his life, his hands were rough. The machine around him was no longer just humming though, it was eating up. This season, everything got bigger. There were goals, risks, and noise. Lots of noise. As you slept, it crept in and shook your bones like a bell that no one wanted to ring. Most of the time, the first mat is one of the best ones. But what I see is real gold. There's too much water. It is not letting the gold fall where it should. It was no longer a gold mine. That place was a test. Parker wanted more than just to win. He wanted to be in charge. 10,000 ounces wasn't just a big goal. That's what it said. Every man on the ground knew what it meant. To perfection. Not a mistake. Not a gap. No other things. 3 plants. 1 room. One man thought he could handle everything. It looked great on TV. However, it felt like suffocating when it wasn't being filmed. It got very hot in the gold room. Every mistake, missed deadline, or extra time was a blow. Not to Parker or the camera crew, but to Chris. He took the hits in silence, putting a lot of stress on himself that no one else could understand. He was no longer working toward gold. He just didn't want to let anyone down. That was what his body said first. Pain didn't go away after I slept. Coffee couldn't break the hold of the tiredness. It was the kind of tiredness that wouldn't go away between jobs. Even worse, his thoughts began to wander. A missed cue here. A response that was too slow there. There is nothing big or dangerous. But Chris saw it, and if he saw it, it meant something. The crew saw it too, even if they didn't say anything. Mitch looked around more. Tyson looked around to see what was going on. Everyone thought the same thing but didn't say it. There's a difference. It's not wrong, it's just different. The air was tense and couldn't be pinned down. The change was clear to even Parker. That wasn't what he said, but he didn't need to. His desperation got stronger. His check-ins happened more often. The man who cleaned, counted, and caught the gold was getting tired, but the gold had to keep coming in. I told Parker I would do my job until I either got tired of it or stopped being able to do it. We're almost at the I can't do it anymore point. Chris kept going anyway. His brain wasn't set up to leave work unfinished, but the ground was moving under him. Not the ground, but his feet. His quiet confidence, which he had kept through years of washouts, mechanical problems, and runs where he couldn't sleep, had begun to fade. He thought back to times when a broken pump or a clogged screen was the worst thing that could happen. Time was now the worry. Time to finish, time to rest, and time to just breathe. His count of ounces was over. He kept track of the time that was quiet, the time between one emergencies and the next. That's how things had turned out, ready for the next system to break down. The surprise that no one saw coming. That quiet moment that would end an era. Then it took place. Not a fall or a big scene, just a moment. Small, private, and unfilmed. This is the kind of moment that only Chris would ever see as important. He stood over the trash can and stared at a collection tray. His arms were dirty. Gold shines at him again. Not a lot. A good number of ounces. Good enough to feel good about. He didn't smile though. He did not nod. He did not respond. He did nothing but stare. After that he left. Now I saw that even the gold didn't shine like it used to. That was the moment of change. He wasn't born to work in a gold mine. He turned into one. Made from mud, sweat, and stress. Any metal won't stay the same though. Parker was driven, focused, and never gave up. Parker wasn't going any slower. He was going faster and talking about the next season.
More ounces, bigger setups, and less room for mistake. Chris was no longer able to keep up that speed, not with the same fire and not for free. The cost was slowly making its way in. I had back pain, couldn't sleep, and a lot of stress that affected everything. It was not a dramatic event. It was about getting through. He had always been there to help, the person who made sure the lights were on during storms. Now though, the storm was inside the house. It was in his ribs, his spine and the behind his eyes, where sleep should have been. Some of the stress was from having to deliver. The fear was what made it heavy. Not wanting to let someone down. Fear of leaving and seeing everything fall apart. Fear of giving up and becoming the person who gave up, instead of the person who gave everything. But this was the truth. When you give everything, you know when you have nothing left. That was something Chris was slowly, reluctantly, and painfully coming to understand. The group was coming together. People were testing out new tools. Tatiana was taking the lead. Of course, the man who kept the rate steady could not be replaced, no matter how hard they tried. There was a beat in the gold room, but it was becoming less steady. The sun rose and set over the same muddy fields all over the site. The same worn-out tools, and a pile of tasks to do. Chris moved through it like a barely there shadow. Watching and working at the same time. He was letting go somewhere in that beat though. Giving up the idea that he had to carry everything. Letting go of the idea that the job had to break him before he could quit. The choice wasn't very exciting. It wasn't made out of anger. In the quiet times between cleanups, tool checks, and while waiting for the next load, it was made. The kinds of times that help you see clearly when everyone else is shouting. He saw the gold, the tools, and the crew. He saw it from far away for the first time. He didn't see it as something to win, but as something he already had. When the gold came back, Chris had already let go of something. The man who made it through the rush. You don't matter to the Klondike. It doesn't matter how long you've been there, how many ounces you've cleaned, or how many times you've saved the group from danger. You can only take what the ground gives you. And Chris Doumit has taken too much. Not just in gold, but also in dirt. He did more than just dig for gold. Every day, every year, he pushed himself until there was nothing left to dig but the truth. It was never about getting attention. Chris didn't want to be on camera or make the news. Interviews and online praise didn't show how valuable he was. How many problems didn't turn into disasters, and how many crews made it through the shift without breaking down were used to measure it. He had fixed things that were broken, but now it was him that needed to be fixed. He checked out the camp. It was the tools, the engines, and the language of tiredness that men who were no longer pretending not to be tired spoke to each other. There were still pay runs. Still the ounces came in. But something was different. The gold totals were being watched by everyone. Chris was keeping an eye on the door. What takes place when the person who steps back and holds it all together? That was the real question. Nobody but the crew should be on the show. The real group. The ones who died with him in the spring frost and summer sun. He thought back to the first time he stood here. Not as a child, but as a builder or carpenter caught in the middle of a gold rush. There was no guide or plan, just a man with a bunch of tools and a smile. At that time the ground was strange. The job was short-term, but something grew. Something too big to back out of. He didn't just get used to it. He did very well. And in the process became a hero without trying to be one. They started to lean on him. The person who came when things went wrong and stayed until everyone else left. Gold should always be dried outside, never inside. It gives off a dangerous gas, and if you don't close it, you will hurt yourself. The camera got a few glimpses, but the real work was always going on behind the scenes. At times when everyone else gave up, Chris was still knee-deep in mud trying to fix broken tools. There was a strange air about the last cleanouts of the season. Not really sadness, more like respect. When you know that something important is ending, this is the mood you get. Tatiana was getting used to her new job. The crew looked up to her. Because Chris liked her, that was more valuable than any resume. Parker made his numbers, or at least got close enough to look like he did, but it cost him a lot. That's not in money, but in people, in wear and tear, and in slowly realizing that the grind doesn't care about your memory. It just grinds away. No one looked up, but everyone felt like the room had dropped in pressure, like something had moved. He wasn't going to quit. He was ending a story. He had already given everything he had. He was now telling himself it was okay to stop. The gold room was cleaner when he left than when he came. Aligned the tools, checked the machines, and placed the buckets. Because that's who he was. He wanted it to keep going smoothly. Even on the way out, he kept things together. It wasn't all at once that he wasn't there. Small things let it in. A question that no one knew the answer to. A fix that took longer than usual. There was quiet where there used to be laughter. No matter how driven and smart Parker was, he knew what he had lost. Chris did more than just work. He showed the way. The man who didn't give up, who didn't blink, and who made it look easy when it wasn't. Taking his place wasn't just a job. It was a message, to tell you that even the best people get tired. And across the Klondike, Chris Doumit wasn't watching the show. He was in a quiet lodge, or on a road far from the mine. Took a moment to breathe. It had been a long time, but they had also made something that couldn't be broken. A heritage that was carved out of rock and steel. A big problem is that someone who hasn't done this before is almost worse than no one. I don't care if they have a lot of knowledge, man. Has no training. You can find us and we'll train them. I'll do it, okay? I'll get it done as soon as I can.
His name wasn't just in the titles. It ran through everyone who stood next to him. The work tried to break him. It almost did, but he left on his own terms. Don't be hurt or angry, just finish. Even after weeks, everything still had his prints on it. His number is still written on every filter. Every wrench that was left was put back where it belonged. The younger crew members did the same things he did without realizing it. They checked things over and over again. They did it that way because Chris would have, not because they were told to. His discipline had turned into a set of rules. His ability to wait had turned into a plan. His work ethic turned into a ghost that ran the whole business without saying a word. Tatiana did a good job for the room. She quickly learned the timing, the attention, and the little things that made the difference between good work and great work. Even she, though, told herself in private that the way Chris used to run the place was holy. It's not holy because of a belief, it's holy because it was one. Parker lived in a world where mistakes cost real money, and delays meant losing time and money. Having someone like Chris was never a choice, it was a must. Chris was like a human failsafe, an important part of the engine that couldn't be replaced by steel or software. Chris had been through the worst. Broken belts, frozen valves, and engine room floods in the middle of the night. Still, he came to work every day with the same easy walk and half smile, ready to do what needed to be done and move on without making a fuss. He did everything and then left. But this is the question that no one wants to ask. What did Parker do that was too much? Let me know what you think. Hit like and subscribe for more facts that no one else will tell.